What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the channel. I know, been a while, but we're back. This video here, 2016 F350 6.7 Powerstroke. We are installing a DRC pump conversion from S&S Motorsports. So follow along and let's get started. All right, goes first off, you open the box, unbox it. Beautiful kit. So in the kit we have our DRC pump, some thread locker, these two studs, these two bolts, adapter plate, fuel line bracket, new fuel line clamp, a plug, an adapter for the fuel pressure sensor that goes in here in the rail, new feed lines for the rails from the pump, and new feed lines for the pump from the tank. Also bought a new vacuum pump gasket as well. It also comes with probably one of the best instruction manuals that you can find for installing. So S&S, you're doing a great job on all this stuff. So first things first, you want to disconnect your batteries and isolate the cables. That is done. Then take off your air tube or your air breather tube or air filter tube. So just a clamp here, this bolt. There's a line that goes in here, you just have to undo. A line that goes here, you pop out of there, and this whole thing goes out of the way. Once that's out of the way, you also want to take off your one charge pipe, the one that goes into the turbo or comes out of the turbocharger. Now this here is just a kind of a quick connect with this ring that slides. The other end is a clamp. Pop that out. Then you have to unplug your map sensor. You also need to unplug, I think this is a back pressure sensor, and take this harness out of here. Once you have that harness out and everything are unplugged, there's a bolt for this heater tube that you need to take out right there. Also, the fuel filter, the whole housing has to come out. So you undo the lines off of it, and then there's 1, 2, 3, 4 bolts. 3 bolts that mount, and then a line mounts onto the 4th bolt. Take that off. Then you can start unbolting this contraption, which is the intake manifold. As you can see, there is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13 bolts. Also, you have to take the dipstick tube for the transmission and the engine oil out. This bolt snapped, but it is also on a bracket on this bolt here with a nut on it. So once that's out, you just kind of take it up out of the way. Then once you unbolt all the bolts on this thing, it's kind of tricky because it is sitting in there like this. So to get it out, you have to lift up on the front and kind of spin it out and then up. Once you have that off, then you want to take the lower manifold off. So it consists of the other charge pipe. It is just basically a gear clamp on this truck, and this ring here pops out. Then this part comes off. You unplug this connector here for the throttle valve. Take this EGR crossover pipe off with unplugging the EGT sensor, which mounts down under in here like so. Undo this clamp, undo the crankcase vent, and then there is 1, 2, 3 bolts, and then this whole unit just lifts up and out. Once you have that done, then you got to take your fan off. Now, the fan is just normal threads, so righty-tighty, lefty-loosey, but when you go to loosen the bolt or the nut, the tensioner on the belt will loosen and the pulley will just spin. So you need the holding tool to go in and get it. Like to go in and hold the fan tool, or the fan clutch, sorry, or not, the fan pulley, sorry, which is this right here. So the holding tool has two pins that stick in here, and then you can hold it, and then you put your wrench on and just pop that, take the fan off. Now this thing has a ton of room in the front here. So that fan can just go in there without having to take the shroud and all that stuff off. And then once you got your fan off, you need to take this bracket off. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 bolts. They're all very long bolts. Now the reason we take this bracket off is to access the water pump, or the vacuum pump. So this is the vacuum pump. There's 1, 2, 3, 4 bolts, and then this comes out. Set that aside. Then that will give you access to the CP4 pump. And it has this nut on it. This nut's a 27 millimeter, so you can crack that loose, take that nut off, but you have to rotate the engine to line up the timing marks. Now, there's a double mark on the CP4 gear and a single mark on the camshaft gear. So the double marks have to be lined up with the tooth with the single mark. So the single mark tooth goes in here. And then this gear, you gotta kind of pry it or try to wiggle it a little bit, will pop off. And then, on the back of the pump, there is a bracket which holds the fuel lines. For getting the fuel lines off, you got to take the two off the back of the pump, down in. They run across this valve cover here, held on by a bracket here, and go over to the lines there. There's also the crossover pipe that runs from the rail on this side to the rail on the other side. You don't have to take it right off. You just loosen this bolt, or take this bolt out and take the bracket off down here. And then what actually holds the pump in there are 3 of these bolts, or these big long nuts on studs. All right, so after you got your pump out, you got to take these 2 bolts out. These are the top mounting bolts for the pump. So they'll thread into the cover, and then the studs will stick out past, and then the nuts and stuff go on them. So there's 2 of them, 1 on each side, like so. And if you come over to these sweet instructions, you'll see where the pump house, or the pump, where the pump gear comes through. You see, once you have the gear out, it's these 2 bolts right here. So you would take those 2 out and snake them out of this opening here. I had to bring them out as far as I could, kind of turn them sideways and thread them basically out of the holes. It's really tight, but they will fit. So the bottom stud stays. Then you want to clean the mounting surface off so it's nice and clean. Then you come over to this bracket. Now the bracket that comes in the kit looks the same as this cutout, but doesn't have these 2 studs installed. You need to install those 2 studs with a little bit of the blue Loctite on them. So they go in the top 2 holes, because that bottom stud that you left in there slides through this hole here. Then these 2 bolts here that are T45, they will go in the tapered holes, or the beveled hole, tapered holes in the housing, like this adapter bracket, and those 2 bolts will thread into these 2 holes. And you also put a little blue Loctite on the threads and lubricant on the taper so it doesn't bind and you can get a nice engagement. I used ARP stud installer lubricant. You could also use engine oil, just don't put a ton on it or it'll get in the threads and may cause some issues. So once you have that done, and that is all tightened down, torque specs for everything come in the instructions, which is freaking beautiful. So once you have that done and that installed, I took a vacuum and vacuumed out the valley. Then it is time to install the pump. So I've already got the pump installed and everything, just to save a little bit of time. So you see it down in here. You reuse the 3 long nuts that you took off of the studs. So there's one here, one down in the bottom. The kit comes with 2 new high pressure lines. So you want to install those. You'll reuse this factory bracket and this factory bracket. And they will come over and install into the rail like so. So you can see those 2 right there. This is still the factory crossover line, you want to say, that goes from rail to rail. Now, the instructions say to take that line out, which is this line here. But I found I had enough room if I took this nut, or sorry, bolt, and that bolt on that bracket right there out, and I could kind of move the line aside, angle the pump, and got it in and pushed it in after lubricating the O-ring a little bit with some transmission grease. Pushed it in, the pump went in good, and then I could tighten these up. And then this here bracket, you reuse the 2 bolts that came out of the other bracket for the fuel lines, and they will go in there and hold that. And this new bracket that comes with the pump has a tab down here that has a threaded hole for clamping these 2 lines. If you don't clamp them, you get vibrations and stuff like that on it, and can cause you some issues. And then you can take the new two new feed and return lines that come with the pump, take the caps off of this end, they go down in the pump, start this threaded in, kind of tighten a little bit, wiggle it, tighten a little bit, wiggle it, and it'll run over. So you'll come back and around to this hold down that you reuse from the old pump, and the new line. The new line goes, this is the low pressure line, it goes back, and there's a quick connect that installs on the quick connect fitting that the original line came on, or came off of. There's also a stand that comes up for this original line to push down on. It is just a quick connect. And then this line here, you just leave hanging until your fuel filter is put back in. But first, before I do the oil fill, I'll do the oil fill, but then before doing the intake and the lower intake, I'm going to do the front pump gear. It looks like it has to be rotated a little wee bit because the keyway has to be at 12 o'clock and there's a little balance hole that has to be at 7 o'clock. So I will get that all done and then we'll meet up again. Alright, so I got the pump nut torqued up to 60 pounds. So you can see the single timing marks on the cam gear, dual timing marks on the pump gear. This balance divot is at the 7 o'clock position, and the keyway lines up with the slot for the vacuum pump. So that's at 12 o'clock, 7 o'clock. Timing marks lined up. And we're ready to put the vacuum pump and the fan back on. Alright guys, so once you got your vacuum pump in there, there's 4 bolts that are 8mm. You can see one of them there, the rest of them go around. You can hook up this here little vacuum line that goes onto the bigger line, route your belt back on, and then install your fan clutch with the connector going onto the bolt that holds the fan bracket. For the connector bracket. Then you want to install your lower manifold, which is this unit here. So to do that, there's 1, 2, 3 bolts. Just set that down in, tighten those 3 bolts up, away you go. Then you want to put your intercooler pipe back on this side. This end just pushes on, this end is a clamp. Down in there, that orange connector, that is for this throttle valve is what they call it. It's technically not a throttle, but that's what it is. Then you're going to put your EGR crossover pipe on, 2 bolts here, 2 bolts here. Electrical connector gets routed down to here and plugged in. Then you're ready for this unit. This thing's kind of a pain in the butt. You gotta kind of get it down angled, get this corner back behind this coolant pipe first, and then kind of push it in. It's gonna be tight, but it will go in. Then there is a sequence to tighten the bolts up, which is right here in the instruction manual for the install. So you see, you start here, there's 1, 2, and then the rest of them. Then once that is in, you can come over to the lines and install this adapter for the fuel, I think it's a fuel temp sensor, and then install this plug that comes with the kit. You install this electrical, or not electrical, line holder, and reuse the bottom part of it, the metal part that the push pins push into. You reuse that. It mounts to the fuel filter base. Put your fuel filter base in, put your fuel filter in, attach your dipstick. This line that we just installed with the kit runs up to the fuel filter. Plug that in, and then you have to install the sensor into there. Hook up this vacuum line again. It is just a quick connect on here. Put the intake back on. Reconnect this fuel line, or not fuel line, sorry, coolant hose back onto there. Alright guys, there we go. Also forgot to mention you have to put the charge pipe back on. So she's all ready to fire up. Everything's back together. Just have to cycle the key and prime the fuel system and crank her up. So turn the key on. You probably can't hear it, but I can hear the fuel pump kick on and pushing fuel. Well, it's doing that. Just gonna check for leaks quick. Everything looks good that way. I'm just gonna cycle it twice just to make sure we got fuel up there. Overall review of the kit, nice kit. Install is fairly straightforward and simple. Not simple, but install is fairly straightforward. There's a few things that take a little bit of patience to get to go right. Let's put it that way. But yeah, this thing has 669,000 kilometers on it. Don't see that high a K on too many trucks. But yeah, now I'm gonna crank her over. Might crank for a little bit before she fires, just because it does have to prime the rails and stuff somewhat. Not too bad. It's running. She's running. She's fired up. And there we go. So thanks for watching. Hopefully you enjoyed this video and found it informational and informative. And yeah, we'll catch you on the next one.